Hi guys, Jimbo here, the driving test guy in New South Wales, helping you pass your New South Wales P1 driving test first go, hopefully. Okay folks, so we are in the middle of the top 5 fail countdown, and today is number 2. And number 2 is, and drum roll, bad gap selection decision. Yep, that is a mouthful, I know. Bad gap selection decision. Okay, now what this is about is problems in selecting gaps in traffic. Now, there are 3 main fail item situations where gap selection becomes a problem. Okay, the first one is when you are taking a gap that is, say, too tight. You go, and the car that you're giving way to is forced to slow down. Now, that fail item is the F2, failing to give way. The second of the 3 main areas with gap selection decision is when you take a gap that is more than just being too tight, it's actually dangerous. And the examiner has to intervene and stop the car, otherwise there will be a collision. Now, when they intervene, that will be the F6 fail. So on your test, if your examiner stops the car for you, you're out. Now, the third fail item related to gap selection decision is when you try and give way to someone who's giving way to you. And they're giving way to you, and you're not going, and you're holding up the traffic, and this now becomes a bit of a dangerous situation. So the examiner gives you the F7 fail for creating a dangerous situation because you're unnecessarily holding people up. So let's now look at the first situation where you take a gap that's a little bit tight, forcing another driver to slow down, resulting in the F2 fail item.
Okay, so when we talk about gap selection decision, there are 2 varieties that we need to deal with. If you look at the image on the screen, we are the green car A, and we are turning right and we are giving way to both of the other 2 cars. The first variety is seen with the relationship between us, the green car A, and the blue car B on the left. We will be turning in front of car blue B and joining its traffic stream. So the gap we take should not force car B to slow down or to take any evasive action. So the 2 factors we need to consider is how far back is car B and how fast is it coming in, and we will make that judgment based on experience. The second variety of gap selection decision is when you are turning across the path of another vehicle. And this can be seen with the relationship between us, the green car A, and the red car C. So in this situation, we prefer to take a gap where we have at least a 5-second buffer space with red car C. What that means is, once we've crossed the path of red car C, they will not arrive at the point where we were until 5 seconds has elapsed. Now, just like in our first example, you will also need to factor in how far back that car is and how fast it's coming in to work out the 5-second buffer space. And this will be based on your judgment and your experience. Now, the fail item, the F2, is issued if you pull out and that other car is forced to slow down. So by having the 5-second buffer space, there's 0 chance that that's gonna happen.
Okay, so note that I've only given you one example of each of the 2 types of gap selection decision, but they manifest themselves in many variations on the road. But they fall in always to the 2 categories. So you are either turning or merging in front of other traffic, or you are crossing over their path and just briefly in front of them.
Okay, so in this example, I'll be heading up to the T intersection and turning left. I'll be giving way to the right. This will be an example of a gap selection where I'll be joining their traffic stream, turning in front of them. I've got to make sure that I select a gap that does not force them to slow down. The factors I'll be looking at is how far back they are, but also how fast they're coming in. So we head up to the intersection and you can see on my right is this truck. Now, if I happen to pull out now, it's my judgment that even though I would fit, I would force that truck to slow down. So yes, had I gone at that point, I definitely would not have given way to that truck and I would have been given the F2 fail item. So in this video, we're looking at an example of the second type of gap selection when you're crossing the path of another vehicle. In this situation, we are on a priority road turning right into a side street and we're giving way to the oncoming traffic that we'll have to briefly cross in front of. Okay, so we move up, got a few cars there. There's no gap there, there's only like a half a second gap, but there is a gap coming that we could be taking. So at this point, it is safe to make the turn. Now there is a white car approaching as shown with the yellow arrow. There's a point where it's going to be unsafe. So about now, we've got 1001, 1002, 1003, and that's just too tight a gap to turn in front of an oncoming vehicle because it will be a high probability that they would be forced to slow down and the F2 fail given for not giving way to that vehicle.
Okay, so let's move on now to the second category of the bad gap selection decision. Now, this one relates to the first one, but it's where the testing applicant has taken a gap that is so tight that if the examiner allowed it to play out, that there would be an imminent collision. So the examiner has no choice but to intervene and stop the car, and an F6 fail is given. Now, the reason a student might take one of these gaps is they're not sure yet really who's going first, so they need to brush up on their road rules, or their judgment decision is not the best yet. And that's what I said earlier, it takes a bit of experience to get that judgment right. Now, another reason an examiner might have to intervene and stop the car is a situation where a testing applicant's at an intersection and they don't have good vision. There might be like a truck or some other vehicles blocking the view, and the student hasn't moved in far enough. So they basically just have a very shallow view. And they gotta go. And as soon as they go, a car that was hidden is bearing down on them, and the examiner can see there's gonna be an imminent collision, and they stop the car and you're out. So with the really, really bad vision intersections, you need to make sure that you're pushing in to get sufficient view. So let's have a couple examples of situations where if we went, the examiner will intervene and give the F6 fail item.
So let's use the same footage as before. We're turning left at the T intersection and there's a truck coming in. Now, if we leave it late and enter now, there will be an imminent collision. So your examiner will stop the car and you will be given the F6 fail item. Bang!
Now for you guys that like to be picky, I know in that video it was a 2-lane road and the truck was in the right-hand lane. That does slightly complicate things a bit, but let's just assume it was single lane and when we turn left, the truck will be bearing down on us.
So let's have a look at the example where we're turning in front of cars. So we look at this video again, got a few cars here. Obviously if we went to go now, that would be dangerous. But in this situation, look, at this point we could go, 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 but probably now, if we went to go now with that white car there, it would be too dangerous. The examiner will most probably stop the vehicle and you'll be given the F6 fail item. Bang!
Okay folks, so we now come to the third and final example of bad gap selection decision. And this one's completely opposite to the first two. Now this is a situation when the testing applicant actually has priority to go, but they're not going. And by not going, they're holding up traffic and creating a potentially dangerous situation, and the examiner gives them an F7 fail item. This is often in a situation where they're at an intersection where they have priority, but they're trying to give way to the other person who's actually giving way to you. Or it could be with the traffic lights, not noticing there's a green light pattern that's good for you to go, but you're just not noticing that. So let's have a look at a few examples of this.
Okay, have a look at this diagram. Who goes first, the green car A or the blue car B? Well, quick, 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 quick.
Okay, so if you couldn't tell me who went first with that diagram in the first 2 seconds, well then you need to brush up on your road rules. Because if you do your test now, you're maybe looking at an F7 fail because you're not sure who's going first. You might end up giving way to the person that's giving way to you. Let's have a look at another example.
Okay, so does the red car turning left give way to the right? Well.
Okay, so if you can't tell me if that car gives way to the right or not within 2 seconds, well then you better not book your driving test yet. You better brush up on those road rule skills. Now let's look at one more example. One more example of confusion at traffic lights, and have a look at this image, and I want you to tell me within 2 seconds whether we are allowed to turn left.
So, what do you reckon? Can we turn left? Can we? Can we?
Okay folks, so if you got all 3 of them correct, that's great. You're on your way to passing first go, hopefully. Okay folks, that's a wrap for number 2 in the top 5 countdown of the top 5 fails. Today we looked at bad gap selection decision. So folks, go out and practice your gap selection decision. And if you're new here, please press the subscribe button, the like button, and the notification button. And always remember to stay safe.